The night was silent, except for the rain. A cold, relentless storm hammered against the tall iron gates of Ethan Cole's mansion. The billionaire had been pacing inside his study, unable to sleep, his mind restless from another day of empty victories in the stock market. His empire stretched across cities, his name carried weight, but his heart felt hollow in the echo of his cavernous home. As lightning split the sky, Ethan noticed movement on the security cameras. A small, hunched figure pressed against the gate. He narrowed his eyes, leaning closer to the monitor. "Who the hell is out there at this hour?" he muttered. Suspicion pricked at him. He silenced the alarm and stepped into the storm, his designer shoes sinking into puddles as he walked down the stone path toward the gates. The closer he came, the clearer the figure became. A child. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Soaked to the skin, her tiny body trembled violently as the rain poured over her. Her clothes were torn, her feet bare and muddy. She clutched a faded backpack to her chest as if it were her only possession in the world. Ethan froze. His mind raced with questions. How did she get past security patrols? Who sent her? Is this some kind of setup? The girl's eyes flickered open, wide and frightened, reflecting the golden glow of the mansion behind him. Her lips trembled as she spoke, her voice no louder than a whisper carried by the wind. "Please, don't chase me away." Ethan's breath caught. "I'll be quiet," she stammered, coughing through the rain. "I just need a corner to sleep." The words cut deeper than any accusation, deeper than any insult. They weren't rehearsed or manipulative. They were raw. Desperate. Ethan glanced back at his towering mansion, its hundreds of warm lights glowing behind perfectly polished glass. He looked again at the girl, her silhouette trembling in the cold, curled on the wet ground as if trying to disappear. The contrast struck him like a blow, his world of excess versus her world of nothing. But his instincts screamed caution. This could be dangerous. Someone might be watching. Paparazzi could be hiding in the shadows, waiting for me to make a mistake. A billionaire with a strange child at his gate. Tomorrow's headlines would tear me apart. He scanned the darkness beyond the fence. Every shadow seemed alive. Every gust of wind whispered betrayal. The girl coughed again, shivering so hard she could barely keep her head up. She tried to pull the backpack over herself like a blanket, but the fabric was too thin, too worn. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't used to feeling powerless, but in that moment, he didn't know whether to walk away or reach out. The rain pounded harder. Thunder cracked overhead. The girl's voice broke through his thoughts once more, weaker this time. "I won't be a bother. I promise. Just, please, don't send me back." Her head drooped. Her small frame collapsed against the cold metal of the gate. Ethan's chest tightened. His mind screamed one thing, "This isn't my problem." But his heart whispered another, she might not survive the night. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the billionaire who controlled empires with a phone call, stood frozen in indecision. And as lightning lit the sky, he saw something in the girl's eyes before they fluttered closed. Fear. Exhaustion. And a plea for a kind of mercy the world had long denied her. Ethan swallowed hard, the storm roaring around him. Is this real? Or am I walking into a trap? He didn't know. But one thing was certain, nothing in his life of power and wealth had prepared him for this moment. And as the night raged on, Ethan Cole stood at the gate, staring at the fragile child in the rain, unable to decide whether to walk away or open his heart for the first time in decades. The storm didn't let up. Sheets of rain pelted the gates as Ethan stood frozen, staring at the small girl collapsed against the cold metal. For a long moment, all he could hear was the hammering of rain against the stone driveway, the hiss of water sliding down the mansion walls. Finally, he pulled the walkie clip to his belt. "Daniel," he called, his voice tight, "check the east perimeter. I've got something. Static crackled before his head of security answered. On it, sir. Cameras picked up movement by the gate, but the angle's poor. Yeah, I can see why, Ethan muttered. His eyes locked on the fragile figure. It's a child. There was silence on the other end before Daniel spoke again. Could be bait. Sir, don't approach. Ethan clenched his jaw. He had thought the same thing. Over the years, tabloids and rivals had pulled stunts to expose him, to make him look heartless or foolish. The world loved nothing more than a billionaire's downfall. He crouched slowly, keeping a safe distance. What's your name? He asked, his voice low but firm. The girl stirred, blinking through the rain. Her lips trembled. A.M. Amara. Her voice was thin, almost swallowed by the storm. Who brought you here, Amara? Where are your parents? She shook her head weakly. No one. Her tiny hand clutched the backpack tighter. Ethan narrowed his eyes. You expect me to believe that? A child alone, outside my gate, in the middle of the night. Amara coughed, the sound raw and sharp. She tried to sit up straighter but nearly toppled over. I didn't know, it was your gate, she whispered. I just needed somewhere the rain couldn't find me. The words pulled at something inside him, but Ethan shoved the feeling aside. You could be lying, he said, harsher than he intended. Do you realize where you are? Do you know who lives here? Her eyes fluttered open wider, and for the first time, he saw them clearly, dark, wide, and glassy with tears. She shook her head. No. I don't know you. I don't want trouble. Daniel's SUV pulled up behind Ethan, headlights cutting through the storm. The security guard jumped out, umbrella in hand, already assessing the situation. Sir, we should call the police, Daniel said firmly. This doesn't feel right. Amara flinched at the word police, clutching her backpack tighter, as though the very mention of authority might drag her back into a nightmare. No police, please, she whispered desperately. They'll take me back. I can't go back. Ethan's brows knitted. Back where? Amara's lips pressed shut. Her silence was louder than any confession. Daniel's gaze hardened. See? She's hiding something. Could be coached. Could be wired. Ethan glanced toward the stone pillars flanking his gate. For a split second, he imagined cameras hidden there, reporters waiting for him to act compassionate so they could twist it into scandal. But when his gaze fell back on Amara, his certainty cracked again. Her frail shoulders shook, her thin arms wrapped around herself in an attempt at warmth that never came. He sighed, frustration tightening his chest. Why me? Why my gate? Amara's answer was barely audible. Because, your lights were on. The simplicity of it stopped him cold. No schemes. No strategy. Just a child drawn to the only glow in the storm. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Sir, let me escort her off the property. We can drop her at a shelter downtown. Ethan considered it. That would be the logical move. Detach, disengage, protect himself. But when he opened his mouth to agree, Amara spoke again, voice cracking like fragile glass. Please, don't send me away. I'll be quiet. Her words echoed in Ethan's mind, clashing with memories he had buried deep, memories of another small voice, long silenced. His late daughter. A lump formed in his throat. He shoved it down quickly, straightening, his face unreadable. Stay here, he ordered Daniel, turning back toward the mansion. I'll decide what to do. Sir. Stay, Ethan repeated sharply. His tone brooked no argument. As he walked back up the path, the rain dripping from his hair, Ethan realized his hands were trembling. He didn't like that feeling, uncertainty. Vulnerability. But something about the girl's voice, her presence, had stirred emotions he thought he'd locked away forever. Inside the mansion, warmth enveloped him, but his mind stayed at the gate. He poured himself a glass of scotch, staring at the amber liquid as thunder rattled the windows. Logic screamed to cut ties. Compassion whispered otherwise. And somewhere in the storm outside, a little girl sat waiting, not knowing if the man behind the golden lights would be her salvation. Or her rejection. Ethan's glass of scotch sat untouched. He had been staring at it for nearly 10 minutes, listening to the storm batter against the windows. The warmth of the fire at his back felt wrong, too indulgent, too safe, while a child shivered outside his gate. Finally, with a curse under his breath, he slammed the glass down and strode back out into the rain. Daniel was still there, umbrella in hand, standing stiffly beside the gate. Amara hadn't moved much, except to curl tighter into herself. Her soaked backpack sagged in her lap. Still here, Ethan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Daniel gave him a look. Told you, sir. She's not budging. Ethan crouched closer this time, ignoring the rain dripping down his face. He studied her carefully. Her lips had turned pale. Her small body trembled uncontrollably. She wasn't acting. This wasn't some well-rehearsed trap. She's freezing, Ethan said under his breath. She's a liability, Daniel countered. Ethan hesitated, then exhaled sharply. Open the gate. Daniel frowned. Sir. Do it. Reluctantly, Daniel pressed the button on his key fob. The iron gates groaned as they swung open, the sound heavy against the storm. Amara flinched as the gates moved, her wide eyes darting between Ethan and the opening. She seemed unsure whether this was an invitation or a threat. Ethan extended a hand. Come on. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached out. Her hand was so small, so cold, that it startled him. He guided her gently inside. Let's get you warm, he murmured. Inside the gatehouse, Ethan grabbed a thick blanket from a storage chest. He hesitated before handing it to her. This wasn't just any blanket, it was his late daughter's, still folded exactly as it had been years ago. He hadn't touched it since. But something about the girl's shivering form made him move past the sting in his chest. He draped the blanket over her shoulders. The moment the soft fabric touched her skin, Amara gasped. She clutched it tightly, pressing it against her face. For the first time since Ethan had seen her, a flicker of relief crossed her features. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice cracked, fragile and small. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. You're soaked through. We'll get you dry clothes. Daniel shifted behind him, clearly disapproving. Sir, this isn't wise. Neither is letting a child freeze to death at my gate, Ethan snapped. Daniel fell silent. Ethan turned back to Amara. When's the last time you ate? She shrugged, eyes downcast. Yesterday. Maybe. He frowned. What did you eat? Some crackers. I found them in the trash. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes avoided his. The words hit him harder than he expected. A billionaire with kitchen stocked to bursting, and a child surviving on garbage right outside his walls. Stay here, Ethan said firmly. I'll get you something. Minutes later, he returned with a bowl of soup. He set it gently on the table in front of her. Amara stared at it for a long moment. Then, almost shyly, she picked up the spoon. Her hands shook so badly that broth spilled onto the table. Ethan grabbed a napkin and steadied the bowl with one hand. Slowly. It's not going anywhere. She nodded quickly and obeyed, sipping small spoonfuls. Each bite seemed to thaw her from the inside out. As she ate, Ethan found himself studying her face. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, she had delicate features, eyes too old for her years, but still holding a flicker of innocence. When the bowl was empty, she whispered again, "Thank you." Ethan shifted in his chair. He wasn't used to gratitude. Not genuine gratitude. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said finally. "Where's your family?" Amara's eyes flickered with something, pain, fear, maybe both. She pulled the blanket tighter and shook her head. Ethan leaned back, sighing. He didn't press. Not yet. For now, it was enough that she was inside, warm, and fed. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The storm softened into a steady drizzle by the time the mansion settled into silence. Ethan had moved Amara from the drafty gatehouse to a small sitting room near the kitchen. The fire in the hearth flickered, casting warm light across the plush furniture and polished floors. Amara sat stiffly on the edge of a leather armchair, still clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Her wide eyes darted nervously from the chandeliers to the shelves lined with books she couldn't begin to name. It was clear she felt out of place, like a sparrow that had wandered into a palace. Ethan poured himself a coffee, ignoring the scotch he had abandoned earlier. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. He had let her in. He had fed her. But now what? He leaned against the table, studying her. "So, Amara," he began carefully, "how old are you?" She hesitated before answering. 9. "I think." "You think?" Amara shrugged, eyes on the floor. "Nobody ever celebrated. I don't remember the day." Her words cut through him like a blade. For a man whose birthdays had been splashed across magazines and society pages, the idea of not even knowing your birthday was unimaginable. He cleared his throat. "Where's your family?" Silence. She pulled the blanket tighter, as though it could shield her from the question. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Amara," he said gently, softening his tone, "I need to know. If someone is looking for you, I should." "They're not looking." The words burst out of her suddenly, sharper than he expected. Her small chest rose and fell quickly. "They never looked. Not once." Ethan froze, the coffee cup halfway to his lips. Amara's eyes shone with unshed tears. "They called me trouble. Said I brought bad luck. When the shouting got worse, I ran. It was better outside than in there." Her voice cracked on the last word. She turned her face away, embarrassed, as if revealing too much. Ethan set his coffee down, the sound quiet but heavy in the room. He remembered the cold silence of his own house after his daughter had passed. The hollow echo of footsteps in hallways too large for one man. Different pain. Same emptiness. He pulled a box of tissues from the table and slid it toward her. Amara hesitated before taking one. She dabbed her eyes, then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. "I draw," she whispered. "When it gets too loud in my head. I draw." She smoothed the paper out on her lap. It was a pencil sketch, simple, rough, but haunting. A small figure huddled under a bridge. Rain slanted across the page, drawn in harsh, jagged lines. "That's me," she said softly. Ethan swallowed hard. He had seen priceless art in galleries across the world, but nothing had ever struck him like that crude sketch. Not because of its technique, but because of its truth. "Do you have more?" he asked. Amara nodded slowly, pulling out more crumpled sheets. Drawings of empty plates, a shadowy man with clenched fists, a girl curled in a corner while the world outside passed her by. But there was one different, brighter. It showed a house. Not a mansion, but a small cottage with smoke curling from the chimney. In the window, yellow light spilled out like warmth itself. Ethan picked that one up carefully. "This is different." Amara's lips curved into the smallest smile. "That's my dream house. A place where the lights are always on, and nobody yells." Her voice trembled on the last word. Ethan looked at her, then at the drawing again. For the first time, he saw more than just a stranger at his gate. He saw a mirror. She, too, had been left in the cold, different circumstances, but the same longing for a home that felt alive. "You know," he said quietly, "this house has 1,000 lights. But most nights, only one of them is on. Mine." Amara tilted her head, studying him. "That sounds lonely." The honesty in her tone startled him. Children didn't usually speak to him like that, no hesitation, no flattery, just truth. "It is," he admitted after a long pause. For a while, the room was quiet except for the crackle of the fire. Ethan poured her a small cup of warm milk, setting it in front of her. She wrapped her tiny hands around it gratefully. "Amara," he said at last, "you shouldn't have to live like this. No child should." Her eyes met his, wide and uncertain. "Then why do so many of us have to?" she asked. Ethan had no answer. Not one that would make sense to a 9-year-old, or to himself. The weight of her question hung between them. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, billionaire, tycoon, untouchable man of power, felt something stir deep in his chest. Not just pity. Not just obligation. Recognition. This wasn't just a girl outside his gate. This was a child carrying wounds he understood all too well. The night stretched on, the storm easing into a faint drizzle. Inside the sitting room, the fire crackled steadily, wrapping the space in a cocoon of warmth. Amara had curled up on the armchair, still clutching the blanket. The tension in her shoulders had eased a little, but she remained wary, as though afraid this safety might vanish at any second. Ethan sat across from her, watching the flames dance. He wasn't used to company in this room. He wasn't used to company at all. After a long silence, he cleared his throat. "Do you like hot chocolate?" Amara blinked. "What's that?" Ethan frowned. "You've never had hot chocolate?" She shook her head. He stood abruptly. "Wait here." Minutes later, he returned from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs. He set one carefully in front of her. The rich aroma filled the air, sweet and inviting. Amara sniffed cautiously, then took a tiny sip. Her eyes widened. "It's warm. And sweet." A laugh escaped Ethan before he could stop it. "That's the idea." She giggled softly, the sound so fragile it nearly broke him. He realized it was the first time he had heard her laugh. They sat in silence for a while, sipping. Amara's face relaxed as the warmth spread through her. "You know," she said quietly, "this tastes like what I thought happiness would taste like." The words caught him off guard. He had never thought of happiness as something you could taste. But in that moment, watching her cradle the mug with both hands, he understood exactly what she meant. Later, Ethan found himself in the kitchen again, fumbling with a frying pan. He hadn't cooked in years, staff usually handled meals, but tonight, something compelled him to try. Amara watched from the counter, eyes wide with amusement. "You don't know what you're doing, do you?" she teased. Ethan glanced at her, mock offense in his tone. "I know enough to scramble an egg." The pan sizzled. A bit too much. Smoke curled upward. Amara burst into laughter, clutching her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "That doesn't look like an egg anymore." Ethan groaned, setting the spatula down. "All right, fine. Maybe I've lost the touch." Still laughing, she hopped down and joined him at the counter. "Can I try?" He hesitated, then nodded, guiding her carefully as she cracked an egg into a fresh pan. Her small hands trembled but managed. The egg hissed, this time cooking just right. When she slid it onto a plate and set it in front of him, she grinned proudly. "See? Not so hard." Ethan tasted it. "Better than mine, that's for sure." Her smile widened, genuine and unguarded. After dinner, Ethan led her to the sunroom, where his golden retriever, Max, was curled up. The dog lifted his head, ears perked, tail thumping against the floor. Amara's eyes lit up. "You have a dog." Before Ethan could reply, she knelt beside Max, stroking his fur gently. The dog leaned into her touch, tail wagging furiously. "He's warmer than most people I know," she whispered, resting her cheek against Max's head. Ethan's chest tightened. She said it so simply, so honestly, as though it was just a fact of life. "His name's Max," Ethan offered. "Max," she repeated softly, smiling as the dog licked her cheek. For the next half hour, she played with Max, giggling and chasing him around the room. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching quietly. The sound of her laughter filled corners of the house that had been silent for years. It felt alive again. Later still, Amara pulled her sketchbook from her backpack and began drawing. She sat cross-legged on the rug, brow furrowed in concentration. When she was finished, she turned the page toward Ethan. It was his house, but with one small difference. In the sketch, only one window glowed, just like before. But this time, she had drawn herself inside, curled up on a chair beside the fire. "That's your lonely window," she explained softly. "But now it isn't so lonely anymore." Ethan stared at the drawing, struck speechless. Her innocence. Her honesty. Her ability to see through walls of wealth and power straight into the heart of loneliness, it disarmed him completely. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir inside him. Not just compassion. Not just responsibility. Hope. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the storm clouds reluctant to leave. Ethan sat in his study, staring absently at the screen of his laptop. Numbers, graphs, and endless emails blurred together. His empire was demanding his attention, yet his mind was elsewhere, on the sound of Amara's laughter echoing through the halls the night before. For the first time in years, the mansion hadn't felt like a tomb. He sipped his coffee, then glanced at the security monitor. Amara was in the garden with Max, chasing him between hedges. Her laughter rang out even through the muffled speakers. But as the camera panned, Ethan froze. A flash of movement at the edge of the property. A lens glinting in the early morning light. A photographer. Ethan cursed under his breath. Within the hour, Daniel stormed into the study holding a tablet. "Sir, we've got a problem." He swiped across the screen, revealing a headline already spreading online. "Billionaire Ethan Cole shelters mysterious girl in mansion." Below it, grainy telephoto shots of Amara running in the garden, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. "They're calling her a stray," Daniel said grimly. "Social media's running wild. Some think she's your secret child. Others are saying you've lost your mind." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't care what they say about me." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Then care what it means for her. If Child Services sees this, they'll be knocking on your door before sundown." Ethan's chest clenched. The thought of Amara dragged away, after just beginning to feel safe, hit harder than he expected. By afternoon, the staff had begun whispering. Housekeepers exchanged uneasy glances. One bold maid approached Ethan directly. "Sir," she said carefully, "we're all concerned." "Who is she? Why is she here?" "The press is circling like vultures. This isn't safe for your reputation, or your estate." Ethan waved her off, but he couldn't ignore the ripple of tension spreading through his home. That evening, as rain began to fall again, the doorbell rang. Daniel opened the door cautiously. On the doorstep stood two figures, stern, suited, and holding clipboards. "Good evening. We're from Child Protective Services," one of them announced. "We've received reports of a minor living on this property." Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm. "She's safe here." The woman raised an eyebrow. "That may be true, Mr. Cole, but the law requires us to investigate." "Where is the child?" "Amara," who had been peeking from the staircase, shrank back at the sight of them. Her small fingers clutched the banister as though it might hold her to safety. Ethan saw the terror in her eyes, the same terror that flashed when Daniel had first mentioned calling the police. "No," she whispered, shaking her head violently. "Please, don't let them take me back." The words sliced through the room. Ethan turned back to the officials. "She's not going anywhere tonight." The man with the clipboard stiffened. "Mr. Cole, obstruction could complicate this case. If she's in danger, it's our duty to—" "She's not in danger here," Ethan interrupted, his tone sharp. The officials exchanged a look. Finally, the woman said, "We'll be back with a court order if necessary. This isn't optional." They left, their footsteps echoing ominously down the stone steps. Amara rushed down the stairs and threw herself against Ethan's side, clutching his jacket. "They can't take me," she pleaded. "Please don't let them." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but trembling. "They won't," he promised. "Not if I have anything to say about it." But the threats didn't end there. 2 days later, another knock rattled the door. This time, it wasn't child services. It was a man, grizzled, sharp-eyed, reeking of stale liquor. He carried a crumpled document in one hand. "I'm her uncle," he announced without greeting. "She's blood. And I've got the papers to prove custody." Amara went pale. Her small body froze as though turned to stone. Ethan's stomach dropped. He didn't need Amara to say anything. The look of dread on her face told him everything. The man smirked. "So, you've been keeping her, huh?" "Figures. Rich men always think they can take what isn't theirs. But she's mine. And I want her back." Daniel stepped forward, fists clenched. Ethan raised a hand to hold him back. "Get off my property," Ethan said coldly. The uncle leaned closer, sneering. "You think money makes you invincible? Try fighting me in court. Let's see how far your charity case goes when the law says she's mine." He shoved the papers into Ethan's chest and stalked away, leaving the front door wide open to the storm. Amara's whisper barely carried over the rain. "He'll hurt me, if I go back." Ethan gripped the crumpled papers, his jaw tightening. For years, he had fought hostile takeovers and corporate sharks. But this battle was different. This wasn't about profits. This was about a child's life. And for the first time in decades, Ethan Cole realized he had something worth fighting for. The mansion, once a fortress of solitude, now felt like a besieged castle. Reporters lined the gates day and night, cameras flashing whenever Ethan's car pulled out. Headlines screamed across tabloids. "Billionaire's secret stray, scandal at the Cole estate. Is Ethan Cole exploiting a child for sympathy? Mystery girl sparks custody battle." Ethan had weathered media storms before, but this one was different. It wasn't about his fortune or failed deals. This time, the target wasn't him, it was Amara. Court hearings came swiftly. The uncle, sloppy in demeanor but sharp when cornered, filed for custody. His lawyer painted Amara's presence in Ethan's mansion as inappropriate and reckless. "She belongs with family," the lawyer argued before the judge. "Not paraded around like a charity case." Ethan sat rigid at the defense table, fists clenched beneath the wood. Every time he glanced at Amara, sitting beside a social worker, legs swinging nervously, he felt the urge to stand up and shout. Instead, he spoke calmly but firmly when his turn came. "She wasn't safe with him," Ethan said, his voice steady but weighted. "And she wasn't safe in the system. She came to me because she had nowhere else to go. That wasn't chance, it was desperation." The judge listened, but his expression gave nothing away. The days between hearings were worse. Investigators visited the mansion, questioning everyone. Staff were interviewed about Ethan's intentions. Amara was pulled aside repeatedly, asked to recount her story to strangers with clipboards. Each time she returned, her face paler, her shoulders slumped. "They don't believe me," she whispered one evening, curling into her blanket on the couch. "They think I'm making it up." Ethan knelt in front of her. "You told the truth. That's what matters." Her eyes glistened. What if the truth isn't enough? The question lingered in the air like smoke. The public grew restless. Some voices online defended Ethan, he saved her. Others condemned him, he's buying a child for good PR. At a shareholder meeting, one of his board members leaned close. "This circus is dragging us down. If you care about the company, you'll distance yourself from the girl." Quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "If you think I'll abandon her to protect numbers on a page, you don't know me at all." The man scoffed. "Then you'll lose everything." Maybe so, Ethan thought. But what was everything worth, if it meant leaving her behind? Amara began to notice the shift, too. One night, she overheard Daniel and Ethan arguing in the hall. "Sir, you can't keep this up," Daniel said. "Every day the press digs deeper. Every day the courts tighten their grip. You're risking your entire legacy for her." Ethan's reply was quiet but firm. "She is my legacy now." Amara's heart swelled, then sank. Because she also heard Daniel's final words before storming off. "You won't win. And when you lose, she'll pay the price." That night, Amara crept into Ethan's study, where he sat hunched over a desk littered with documents. His face was drawn, tired, the lines deeper than usual. "Are you going to give up?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up sharply, as though the thought itself offended him. "Never." She bit her lip. "They'll take me away anyway, won't they?" Ethan rose, walked to her, and crouched so they were eye level. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Amara. I've fought men with more power than you can imagine. I've fought to build empires, to protect what mattered. But I've never had a fight worth more than this one." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Promise?" His voice softened. "I promise." But promises didn't stop the world from closing in. The next morning, a letter arrived from the court. A custody trial was scheduled. Evidence would be presented. Witnesses called. A final decision made. And in that sterile room, Amara's future would be sealed, either in Ethan's care, or in the hands of a man she feared more than the storm itself. The courthouse was packed. Reporters crowded the steps outside, cameras flashing as Ethan Cole stepped from his black sedan. For years, he had walked into courtrooms as a man untouchable, lawsuits over business deals, corporate disputes, mergers gone wrong. But this time was different. This time, it wasn't money on the line. It was Amara. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Amara sat at the defendant's table beside her court-appointed advocate, her small hands folded nervously in her lap. She looked so tiny against the towering wood panels and heavy drapes of the courtroom. Ethan took his seat beside his lawyer, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the girl he had promised to protect. At the opposite table, Amara's uncle lounged with smug confidence. His lawyer, a slick-tongued man in an expensive suit, adjusted his tie and stood to speak. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my client is the rightful guardian of this child. He is her family. Yet this billionaire, this man of unchecked power, has taken her into his home without permission, parading her before the media for sympathy points. This is exploitation, plain and simple." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked. The lawyer gestured toward Ethan. "Men like Mr. Cole believe their wealth makes them above the law. But no fortune gives a man the right to steal a child." Amara flinched at the word steal. Ethan's lawyer rose calmly. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole didn't steal Amara. He saved her. When he found her, she was shivering outside his gate, abandoned and terrified. He gave her warmth, food, safety, things her so-called family never provided. The real crime here is that she was left to fend for herself. The judge listened, stone-faced. The uncle leaned forward, snarling. She ran away because she's trouble. She's always been trouble. Amara shrank into her chair, the words stabbing at wounds too fresh to heal. That was the breaking point for Ethan. He stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the air. She's not trouble. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. Ethan's gaze locked on the judge, steady and unyielding. She asked me for less than she deserved, he said, his voice deep, carrying. She asked for a corner. A place in the shadows. But what she deserves, is everything. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The judge's brow furrowed, intrigued despite himself. Ethan continued, his tone trembling with conviction. I have built empires. I've commanded boardrooms. But none of it matters. Not compared to one child who needed to be seen. Because that's all she wanted, not money, not fame, not privilege. She wanted to be seen. And I saw her. For a moment, the courtroom was silent, the words hanging heavy in the air. Then, softly, another voice rose. Amara. She pushed herself to her feet, clutching the edge of the table for courage. Her small frame shook, but her eyes were steady. He didn't save me, she said, her voice fragile but clear. He saw me. That's different. The room stilled. The words echoed like a bell. Even the judge leaned forward, his expression softening. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. All my life, people walked past me like I was invisible. They called me names, said I was nothing. But Mr. Cole looked at me. Not like I was a burden. Not like I was trouble. Like I was, somebody. For the first time, I felt real. Her small voice cracked, but she pressed on. Please don't send me back to the dark. I finally found a light. The uncle slammed a fist against the table, his face red with rage. She's been coached. She's saying what he told her to say. But the room didn't believe him. Not after hearing the raw truth in her trembling words. The judge raised a hand for silence. He turned his gaze from Amara to Ethan, then to the uncle. His face remained unreadable. The court will deliberate, he said finally, banging his gavel. We will reconvene with a decision. The sound of the gavel cracked like thunder through the courtroom, but its echo carried more than noise. It carried the weight of a child's future. The courthouse buzzed with murmurs as the judge's gavel echoed one last time. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked, and the crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Ethan sat rigid, his fists pressed against the table. Beside him, Amara gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles white beneath the blanket still draped around her shoulders. The judge shuffled his papers, his voice calm but weighty. This case is not simple. It concerns not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of justice itself. He looked at the uncle first. Mr. Hayes, you have presented legal documents claiming custody. But the court cannot ignore the testimony we have heard today. A guardian is not defined merely by blood, but by the duty of care, compassion, and responsibility. The uncle shifted angrily in his chair. The judge's gaze turned to Ethan. Mr. Cole, you have shown this court that your actions were not for gain or spectacle, but born out of genuine care. The child's own words testify to the bond between you. A hush fell over the room. Therefore, the judge concluded, custody of Amara Hayes is hereby granted to Ethan Cole, effective immediately. Gasps erupted. Reporters scrambled for their cameras. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, the weight of relief crashing over him. When he opened them, Amara was already looking at him, her eyes wide, brimming with tears. Is it real? She whispered. Ethan nodded. It's real. She leapt from her chair, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. For the first time, she wasn't clinging in fear. She was clinging in joy. As they left the courthouse, the crowd outside erupted with questions and flashing lights. Ethan shielded Amara with his arm, guiding her into the waiting car. Inside the quiet of the vehicle, Amara dug into her worn backpack. "I made something," she said softly, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "For you." She unfolded it carefully and handed it to him. It was a drawing. His mansion again, but different this time. Instead of one lonely window glowing, every window was lit. And in the center window, she had drawn two figures, a tall man and a small girl, both smiling. Below it, in shaky letters, she had written, "Home for real." Ethan's throat tightened. He traced the lines of the drawing with his finger, his vision blurring. "This," his voice broke. He cleared it and tried again. "This means more than anything I own." Amara smiled shyly. "Now your house doesn't look so lonely." He reached into his pocket, pulling out something he hadn't touched in years, a bracelet, simple but precious, that once belonged to his late daughter. He had carried it as a reminder of what he had lost. He placed it gently on Amara's wrist. Her eyes widened. "What's this?" "It belonged to someone I loved very much," Ethan said quietly. "And now, it belongs to someone I love just as much." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stared at the bracelet, then at him. "So I'm, family?" Ethan pulled her close, his voice steady. "More than family. You're my daughter now." Back at the mansion, the staff stood waiting. Some skeptical, others softening as they watched Amara step through the grand doors with her small hand firmly tucked in Ethan's. Max bounded forward, barking happily, nearly knocking her over. Amara laughed, the sound echoing up the marble staircase. For the first time in years, the mansion wasn't silent. It wasn't cold. It was alive. That night, as Amara prepared for bed, she taped her new drawing, "Home for Real," to the wall above her headboard. Ethan lingered at the doorway, watching her crawl beneath the covers. "Do you feel safe?" he asked softly. Amara nodded, hugging the blanket closer. Safe, and seen. Her eyes fluttered closed. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing soft and steady. Ethan stood there for a long time, the bracelet gleaming faintly on her wrist, the drawing glowing in the dim lamplight. For years, he had lived in a house full of lights but empty of warmth. Now, with one child, the emptiness was gone. Weeks passed, and the mansion transformed. Where once silence had lingered like a heavy fog, now the halls rang with laughter, chatter, and the scratch of crayons against paper. Amara had claimed a corner of the sunroom as her studio, taping her drawings across the glass walls until they looked like stained glass windows of dreams. Every morning, she raced down the staircase with Max bounding behind her, her voice carrying through the halls as she called for breakfast. Ethan, a man who had once dined alone at a table built for 20, now found himself laughing at the sight of her spreading jam too thick on toast or spilling milk in her eagerness. The house was no longer a fortress. It was a home. One afternoon, Ethan watched as Amara presented her art project at school. She stood nervously at the front of the classroom, her small voice carrying a weight beyond her years. "This is a picture of a house," she explained, holding up a new drawing. "But it's not just any house. It's a house where the lights are always on. A house where nobody is scared, and nobody feels invisible. One day, I'm going to build a place like this, for kids who don't have anywhere else to go." Her classmates clapped politely, but Ethan's eyes burned with tears. Because he knew she wasn't just speaking about a dream. She was speaking about her future. And for the first time, he realized his legacy wouldn't be skyscrapers or companies. It would be her. That night, as the two of them sat on the porch watching the sun set beyond the manicured lawns, Amara leaned against him, her bracelet glinting in the fading light. "Do you think I can really do it?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked down at her. Do what? Build a place for kids like me. A place where no one has to sleep by gates, or hide under bridges. He smiled faintly. Amara, you already built it. She frowned, confused. What do you mean? He gestured toward the mansion, then to his heart. You turned this house into that place. You lit every window. You reminded me what it means to be alive. You don't need to wait for tomorrow, you're already doing it. Her eyes widened. Really? Really, he said firmly. Then he added, with a softness that came from the deepest place in him, but if you want to dream bigger, if you want to build something even greater, I'll be right there with you. Every step of the way. Amara smiled, her face glowing with the kind of hope that could warm the coldest night. Later, as the stars spread across the sky, she turned to him again. Ethan? Yes. She hesitated, then whispered, you won't ever send me back, right? His heart clenched at the fragility in her voice. He pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Not now, he said firmly. Then, louder, almost like a vow, not ever again. The words hung in the air, carried by the night breeze like a promise sealed against the heavens. Amara nestled against him, finally at peace. In the weeks that followed, Ethan quietly began making calls. Anonymous donations to shelters. Funding for schools. Quiet initiatives under Amara's name. But he never told her. Not yet. Because he wanted her to believe, truly, that when the time came, the dream would be hers to lead. And he knew, deep down, that the little girl who had once asked only for a corner of space outside his gate would one day open doors for countless others. The golden mansion stood tall against the skyline. But for the first time, it wasn't the house that mattered. It was the light inside, warm, unyielding, alive. And as the world watched from afar, wondering what had truly happened when a billionaire found a little black girl sleeping by his gate, the truth remained simple. She hadn't just found shelter. She had found family. And he hadn't just saved a child. He had found redemption. She asked only for a corner in the shadows. Instead, she lit up an entire home. And together, they promised, never again would a child be left outside the gate.